First, is there good evidence for God? What kind of evidence is compelling evidence? When we ask, is there compelling evidence for God, we should also ask, compelling for whom? How do we decide what is or isn't compelling? It depends on the audience. If we were to ask 11th century Europeans if they found the existence of God compelling, virtually all of them would say yes. But if we ask 21st century Europeans, far fewer would say yes. So what's changed? Atheists claim people have just become smarter, more scientific, more in touch with reality. That's the atheist narrative. But I want to propose a competing narrative. Cognitive science says that human beings have natural intuitions, whether they're moral, religious, aesthetic, logical, or mathematical intuitions. Intuitions are mostly unconscious, and they're based on the feeling of compellingness rather than systematic proof. For example, people have the intuition that harming others for no reason is wrong. This is an intuition because people might not even have articulated this as a concrete belief, and they have no logical justification for it, but they still strongly tend to accept it as true. Psychologists have shown that all children naturally develop this moral intuition earlier in life. Beyond moral intuitions, there's also aesthetic intuitions. Humans universally experience disgust at the thought of eating human flesh. There are also logical intuitions. We all intuitively accept the law of non contradiction, that two contradictory statements cannot both be true at the same time. And we also have mathematical intuitions, like five objects is more than one object. There are also intuitions about the world and history. For example, we all intuitively believe that there's an external world that persists even if we're not in it. We also intuitively believe that the past was real and our memories are based on that past reality. We also have natural intuitions about God. Most people in the world and in history believe in spirit beings. According to cognitive science, this belief is biologically rooted. Research shows that children as young as 5 across diverse cultures all express similar beliefs that the universe was created by the supernatural. This is the case even for children in cultures that don't affirm a creator God, like Japanese children. This shows that the intuition to believe that the universe was created by supernatural beings is inbuilt. People also naturally believe that the mind persists after bodily death. Belief in the afterlife is a biologically rooted intuition. Psychologists call this natural theology. So, to recap, humans have many natural intuitions about what is true. When we rely on those intuitions, that is called intuitive thinking. A good way to think about intuitive thinking is like a tendency to find something plausible or true. If I tell you the world doesn't go away when you close your eyes, most people will tend to believe me, even if I don't present some elaborate argument. The idea just has this inherent plausibility because of our human psychology. Now, there's another mode of thinking which is called analytic thinking. Analytic thinking is different because it causes us to question our intuitions rather than just accept things because they feel compelling. We demand further evidence and justification. In other words, analytic thinking is about doubt. We doubt our intuitions and then we explore other possibilities. We gather evidence, we make inferences. We might intuitively feel that eating human flesh is disgusting, but is it actually wrong? Well, let's just gather data and evaluate arguments for each side. This is analytic thinking overcoming intuitive thinking. Both intuitive and analytic thinking are found in human beings, but they're balanced in different ways in different societies. Research shows that intuitive thinking is dominant in some societies and analytic thinking is dominant in others. The other important thing is that when you engage in more analytic thinking, you start doubting more and more of your intuitions. This is studied in dual process theory. People who have maximized their analytic thinking will doubt their religious, moral, and aesthetic intuitions. Only their strongest intuitions remain. For example, their intuitions about logic or about the external world. But for everything else, they demand empirical evidence. But there is no empirical evidence for these things. So when you maximize analytic thinking, people become more and more inclined to a reductionist view of the world defined by scientific materialism, and anything beyond that is doubted. Now let's bring it all back. When we have a debate about good evidence for God, what are our standards? Are we trying to meet the standards of a maximally analytic mode of thinking, the type of extreme analytic thinking of atheists? Why should we? Why should we just accept that standard of evidence as opposed to a more balanced type of cognition that doesn't nuke all our natural human intuitions? What atheists will want to claim here is that we should obviously prefer the maximally analytic mode of thinking. Why? Because that's the mode of thinking that's most likely to give us the truth. But is this true? Does maximizing doubt bring us closer to the truth? Why should we believe that? I would challenge atheists to justify this. Why should we adopt such extreme epistemic standards? In reality, a psychology that balances intuitive and analytic thinking is more suitable for recognizing truth. And this is actually an insight that we find within the history of philosophy and the work of Western philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein. Not all of reality can be reduced to empirical data points to be scrutinized through systematic analysis. The reality is we all experience the reality we all experience is far richer than that. And insisting on maximum analytic thinking actually takes us further from fully seeing reality, like covering up one half of our binoculars. Furthermore, the insistence on maximal analytic thinking is nothing more than a recent product of cultural evolution. For most of history, human cognition was more balanced. So, what changed? Analytic thinking became dominant not because it's more attuned to the truth or because it's more beneficial for humanity. Analytic extremism became dominant because of what we can call cognitive colonialism. To understand how this happened, consider society A, that is analytic dominant, versus society B, that is intuitive dominant. Over time, both societies experience technological and economic growth, but society A experiences this faster. This allows society A to dominate society B. Society A then imposes analytic thinking on its newly acquired subjects by establishing an analytic focused school system. In this way, analytic thinking spreads and dominates more and more societies until it dominates the entire globe. The societies with the most extreme emphasis on analytic thinking win out. That's modern history in a nutshell. Researchers like Joseph Heinrich have explained this history in books like The Secret of Our Success. Now, the fact that analytic thinking can accelerate technology and growth, that sounds like a great thing. But the big question is, just because analytic thinking excels at producing technology, does that mean that maximizing it is better suited to determine truth? I'm not claiming that analytic thinking has no connection to the truth. But again, when you maximize this type of thinking, that means that your analytic capacities start overshadowing intuitions about the world that are also very compelling. Throughout history, all peoples felt intuitively that there were moral, aesthetic, and religious truths about life and purpose, and many of these truths were based on intuitions that were universally shared by all humanity. Now, if you told all these people that they have to reject their intuitions and adopt analytic extremism, which ultimately will bring into doubt all these other intuitions, most people would not accept that. But unfortunately, people don't have a choice. The analytic mode of cognition has been imposed by cognitive colonialism. Secular humanist powers have implemented all manner of social and educational programs over the course of the past 300 years to champion analytic thinking. Why? Because that's the type of thinking that maximizes economic growth. The more people are thinking analytically, the more they produce science and technology, which will increase GDP. Atheists want to tell the story that the debate between atheism and religion is about two sides making arguments against each other, and people decide which is more compelling. But there's another way to look at it. Atheists represent an extremist mode of thinking that results in maximizing GDP and military power. The reason that there are so many atheists today is not because the scientific worldview is inherently compelling. Rather, maximizing analytic thinking allows you to invent nukes and tanks. Most people historically disagreed with maximal analytic thinking, but they were wiped out. Social, technological, economic violence has changed the epistemology of people across the world. Prior to this, no one would have taken atheism seriously, but atheists fail to acknowledge this history. They just assume that analytic thinking should be maximized no matter what. This biases any debate on the existence of God. The theist is always at a disadvantage if he has to mold his arguments to satisfy a mind that's primed to reject anything non-empirical. Humans have strong natural intuitions about reality. We have the intuition that there's an external world, that our memories have truth content. There are intuitions that don't give us any more power to do science or produce technology, but that doesn't make them unreal. Intuitions about the existence of God are among the strongest intuitions humans have, and this intuition is supported by inferential reasoning and communal traditions. If an atheist says he doesn't find these things compelling, we should ask, where do you get your epistemic standards from? Why shouldn't we believe that those standards are unique to modern Western culture and have only emerged very recently in history, primarily because they maximize GDP? Why should we take those standards as arbiters of truth about God or anything else?